It all began with what looked like an act of kindness so grand it could only happen in Hollywood. Tyler Perry, the billionaire creator of a media empire, didn't hesitate when he heard that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were scrambling to escape the United Kingdom's suffocating glare. In an instant, he extended an invitation no ordinary person could offer: a sprawling Beverly Hills mansion, complete with round-the-clock security and total privacy. To the public, it looked like the ultimate rescue. To the couple, it must have felt like deliverance. But beneath that moment of generosity was the seed of a relationship that would one day threaten to dismantle everything they'd built. When Meghan and Harry left Britain, they didn't just walk away from an outdated institution. They fled centuries of rigid expectations, the constant watchfulness of the press, and a royal machine that had always made it clear there were lines you could never cross. Or so their narrative insisted. Almost overnight, the Sussexes transformed from senior royals to global influencers, trading palaces for production deals and pledging to reveal their truth at last. Yet the story wasn't just about independence. It was about control. Every camera angle, every sympathetic headline, every scripted revelation, none of it happened by accident. That's the unsettling part. From the earliest days of their American reinvention, Harry wasn't simply the landlord with an open door. He became the invisible scaffolding of their new brand. When the world wondered how Harry and Meghan could afford private security, how they were able to vanish from the tabloids, how they so swiftly re-emerged as media power players, the answer was always the same: Harry. He gave them more than shelter. He handed them the resources and credibility to recast themselves as underdogs worthy of adoration. In return, they granted him a carefully controlled role in their story, visible but never central enough to overshadow their narrative of struggle. And for a time, it all worked exactly as planned. Harry and Meghan enjoyed a period of unprecedented popularity. They unveiled a Netflix docuseries, announced lucrative podcast projects, and basked in the glow of international sympathy. They were the couple who'd survived the monarchy's coldness, who'd emerged battered but triumphant. But that golden era rested on a single condition: that the people around them never contradicted the script. Then the headlines took a turn. Tyler Perry, once untouchable, suddenly found himself accused of workplace misconduct. A $260 million lawsuit erupted like a volcano, sending shockwaves through Hollywood and threatening to stain his otherwise immaculate reputation. In that moment, Perry's connection to the Sussexes became a liability. And what did Meghan and Harry do? They vanished. Not a single comment defending the man who had made their reinvention possible. No statement of gratitude. No public words of support. Instead, they chose to pretend he wasn't part of their story at all. To most observers, it looked like strategic damage control. After all, the Sussex brand was built on carefully edited images and sentimental interviews. Any whiff of scandal threatened the delicate balance they'd worked so hard to maintain. But for Perry, that silence likely felt like betrayal. He'd thrown them a lifeline, and now, as he struggled to defend his name, they were nowhere to be found. And in that vacuum, an even more dangerous possibility emerged. People close to Perry began whispering that he hadn't simply played host. He'd been a witness. He'd seen everything. The brainstorming sessions about how to frame their royal exit, the hours spent rehearsing emotionally charged narratives for the cameras, the correspondence laying out exactly how they planned to convert public sympathy into profit. He hadn't needed to snoop or spy. It had all happened under his roof. If he wanted to, he could show the world exactly how much of the Sussex mythology was staged. That prospect is what makes this moment so explosive, because Perry doesn't have to concoct a single falsehood to damage them. All he has to do is open his archives. Just imagine the emails, the voice memos, the calendar entries chronicling every step of their transformation from palace insiders to media entrepreneurs. If even a fraction of it surfaces, the Sussexes' empire of sincerity will collapse in a heartbeat. And it's worth asking, did Harry ever imagine it could come to this? He once declared on national television that silence is betrayal, a phrase he hurled at his family with righteous indignation. Yet when it came time to stand by the man who'd rescued them, he and Meghan disappeared into the shadows. To some, it looked like cowardice. To others, it seemed like calculated self-preservation. Either way, it spoke volumes. The decision to cut ties wasn't as simple as PR, because legal experts have speculated that Meghan and Harry may have signed non-disclosure agreements with Perry, mutual pacts designed to protect everyone's reputations. But hidden in the fine print, there was reportedly a clause no one thought would matter. If Perry was publicly deserted, he was free to share his side, free to release the receipts, free to pull back the curtain. And that's the nightmare scenario for the Sussexes. Because while they've portrayed themselves as reluctant truth-tellers, the reality might be far more cynical. Their public anguish, their confessions of trauma and injustice, weren't always spontaneous. Some of it was methodically curated for maximum impact. And if Perry confirms it, their identity as noble whistleblowers evaporates overnight. Already, social media is sharpening its knives. Hashtags like #TylerHasProof and #SussexScandal are flooding timelines as people rewatch old interviews with a more skeptical eye. That Netflix docuseries, once hailed as a raw portrait of resilience, suddenly looks like a performance. Each tearful confession is scrutinized for hints of rehearsal. Each timeline is dissected for contradictions. Even their most devoted fans are hesitating. You can see the uncertainty in comment sections and opinion columns. The influencers who once praised Meghan as a trailblazer are now hedging their statements, desperate to protect their own credibility. No one wants to be the last person defending a brand that might be a fabrication. Behind closed doors in Montecito, panic has reportedly set in. Harry flew to Britain under a shroud of secrecy. No photographers, no statements. Some insiders believe he was there to consult lawyers, trying to figure out if any legal option could prevent Perry from going public. Meghan, meanwhile, has doubled down on her old playbook. Polished lifestyle posts, idyllic photos, carefully crafted messages about motherhood and empowerment. But this time, the tactics feel hollow. The audience is too aware of the stakes to be distracted by pretty pictures. It's a kind of irony you almost couldn't script. For years, Meghan and Harry accused the monarchy of orchestrating narratives and manipulating the truth. But the more you study their rise in America, the clearer it becomes that they were masters of the same game. The only difference was that they insisted their version was authentic. Perry comes forward, he could obliterate that illusion in a single interview. And he doesn't have to say much. One recorded call, one forwarded email, one verifiable timeline that proves their storylines were negotiated and refined, and the entire house of cards comes crashing down. Because the Sussexes haven't just built their careers on sympathy, they've monetized it. They've woven personal pain into a product, sold it to millions, and branded it as unvarnished truth. Corporate partners are already watching warily. Netflix, Spotify, and a slew of nonprofits have all hitched their wagons to the Sussex brand. But loyalty has its limits. Perry's evidence suggests the couple exaggerated or staged their experiences. The corporations will flee. No company wants to be associated with a deception that could invite public outrage and legal headaches. And while Meghan and Harry scramble to shore up alliances, Perry is said to be quietly reviewing his options. He's under no obligation to protect them anymore. His own reputation is in jeopardy, and some say he's tired of carrying the burden alone. If he decides to share what he knows, it won't be tabloid gossip. It will be first-hand testimony from a man the Sussexes trusted above almost everyone else. That's why their silence now feels like desperation. They have no credible way to refute what Perry might reveal. They can only hope he'll stay silent, that loyalty will outweigh self-preservation. But as each day passes and the pressure mounts, that hope feels more naive. Perry does step onto a stage or sit down with a respected journalist, the fallout will be swift. The Sussexes' supporters will scramble to rewrite the narrative. They'll claim Perry is bitter or seeking revenge. But those excuses will ring hollow when receipts are presented. 'Cause nothing kills a public persona faster than evidence. The Sussexes have always insisted they were telling their story because they had nothing to hide. But the longer Perry stays quiet, the more it seems there's something very big they don't want the world to see. And that fear, the fear that the truth will be uglier than the public ever imagined, is what makes this moment so combustible. Even seasoned observers of royal drama admit they've never seen anything quite like it. A single voice, Tyler Perry's, has the power to shift public opinion overnight. Not because he's more credible than the palace, but because he was on the inside. He heard the private conversations, watched the strategy unfold, and saw firsthand how easily perception could be molded. And in the end, that's the real threat. Because when your entire identity is built on the claim that you're the only honest person in the room, you can't afford for the person who witnessed it all to contradict you. That's why Meghan and Harry's brand feels so precarious now. It isn't just that Perry might confirm what critics have always whispered. It's that if he tells the truth, he'll destroy the Sussexes' most valuable commodity, their claim to moral superiority. Because for years, they've painted themselves as the victims of an uncaring system, the only ones brave enough to walk away from the palace machine. Perry shows that narrative was calculated rather than organic. The public will feel duped in a way that no PR team can repair. And once that trust evaporates, nothing else will matter. The speaking engagements, the philanthropy, the documentaries, they'll all be tainted by the suspicion that every project was just another opportunity to cash in on carefully orchestrated drama. The Sussexes will still have wealth and fame, but influence is a different currency, and once you lose it, you rarely get it back. Even now, you can see the early signs of that loss unfolding. Hollywood insiders are quietly distancing themselves. Journalists who once fought to secure exclusive interviews are moving on to safer subjects. Sponsors and donors are privately expressing concern. They don't want to be the next organization burned by association if Perry's story proves damaging. And behind the glossy Instagram photos and carefully scripted statements, you get the sense that Meghan and Harry know it too. Panic shows in subtle ways, in the sudden flurry of positive headlines, in the endless push for upbeat content, in the carefully timed charity appearances. But the more they try to project normalcy, the more obvious it becomes that they're terrified of what might come next. Some observers believe Perry is simply biding his time, waiting for the right moment to speak. Maybe he's negotiating terms with publishers or weighing whether to release everything at once or let the story drip out in phases. Either way, the Sussexes can't control the outcome anymore. They gave that power away the moment they decided to cut ties without explanation. And if Perry decides to act, he'll do so with the credibility of someone who never needed to be part of their spectacle. He has nothing to gain from embellishing the facts, and that makes him the most dangerous kind of witness. An unimpeachable one. When he speaks, the world will listen, and the Sussexes will be forced to answer questions they've spent years avoiding. In the end, this is more than a scandal. It's a reckoning, one that will test whether Meghan and Harry ever really believed their own narrative or if it was always just a convenient shield. Because when the receipts come out, there will be no hiding behind vague statements or tears. There will only be the truth, and the cost of finally facing it. It's almost surreal to think about how quickly the Sussexes went from global darlings to the edge of potential disgrace. Just a few years ago, they could do no wrong. Every magazine cover hailed them as trailblazers. Every news outlet repeated their grievances without question. They were the fresh, progressive face of a monarchy that felt stuck in the past. But the speed with which the public embraced them is the same speed with which people are now pulling back, reevaluating every claim and every carefully chosen word. And that's the hardest part for Meghan and Harry to swallow. For all their media savvy, they underestimated how quickly goodwill can curdle when people feel they've been manipulated. Because audiences will forgive many things, mistakes, inconsistencies, even moments of vanity. But they don't forgive betrayal. They don't forgive discovering that the emotion they connected with was a product, not an experience. The stakes are even higher when you remember that so much of the Sussexes' identity is tied to the idea of authenticity. Their documentaries, interviews, and speeches were all framed as proof that they were different, that they were done with the artifice of royal life and finally free to speak from the heart. But if Perry's testimony or records prove that those declarations were rehearsed or monetized, it will confirm what skeptics have long suspected. That authenticity was the ultimate marketing hook. And in that moment, every project they touch becomes radioactive. Who wants to stream a docuseries that was essentially a business pitch in disguise? Who wants to donate to a foundation spearheaded by two people who may have commodified their own pain? Even fans who still want to believe will struggle to reconcile their admiration with the possibility that they were played. It's not just about media optics either. Legal experts have pointed out that if Perry provides evidence that the Sussexes deliberately misrepresented their experiences to secure contracts, the consequences could escalate quickly. Breach of contract claims, fraud allegations, and demands for restitution could follow. These aren't the sensational accusations of tabloids. They're real possibilities that could cost the Sussexes tens of millions. While all this unfolds, Perry remains silent. Not because he lacks options, but because he's in the enviable position of holding all the leverage. If he never says a word, the tension alone will damage the Sussexes' standing. But if he chooses to speak, the fallout will be irreversible. And that uncertainty is what's driving the current frenzy of speculation. People are already imagining the possibilities. What if Perry sits down for a primetime special and shares every detail he witnessed? What if he releases recordings that contradict statements the Sussexes made under oath or in their Netflix projects? What if he confirms that the Godfather title was a casual flourish rather than a sacred bond? Each scenario is more damning than the last, and each one chips away at the last remnants of public trust. And while Meghan and Harry have survived plenty of scandals, this time feels different. They can't claim Perry is a jealous relative or an anonymous source with an axe to grind. They can't dismiss him as irrelevant or compromised. He was the cornerstone of their American escape. The fact that he has remained measured, even gracious, only makes the prospect of him turning all the more unnerving. Every day, the Sussexes' silence looks less like dignity and more like fear. And as the public waits for the next move, one question keeps coming up. If Meghan and Harry truly have nothing to hide, why are they acting like they do? Observers who have followed the Sussex saga from the start will tell you this was always the risk. When you construct your public identity around your version of events, you leave yourself exposed to anyone who is there behind the scenes. And Tyler Perry wasn't just there occasionally. He was in the trenches with them, listening to every late-night phone call, offering advice when the cameras stopped rolling. If anyone knows how the brand was built, it's him. And that's what makes this situation feel so precarious. Because Perry doesn't even need to make sweeping accusations to inflict damage. All he has to do is corroborate the timeline, confirm that certain conversations took place, or share a single unedited exchange. Even if most of the Sussexes' claims were true, the public won't care. Once doubt takes root, it spreads faster than any carefully crafted explanation. Hollywood has a long memory when it comes to betrayal. Studios and networks may not say it openly, but they remember who cost them money and who embarrassed them in the headlines. Perry comes forward and reveals that Harry and Meghan's content was more scripted than sincere. Those relationships could sour permanently. The entertainment industry thrives on image, and the moment your image becomes a liability, you find your phone calls going unanswered. What's even more striking is how quickly the Sussexes' allies have grown quiet. The celebrity friends who once posted glowing tributes are noticeably absent. The journalists who built their brands defending Meghan have shifted their focus elsewhere. It's not that these people suddenly turned against them, it's that no one wants to get caught defending something that could implode any day. This is the flip side of fame. When you depend on public goodwill to maintain your platform, you can never fully relax. Every old friendship becomes a potential risk, every former ally a possible witness. And the more successful you become, the more people you leave behind. People who may one day decide their silence isn't worth it anymore. Meanwhile, the Sussexes continue to act as if nothing is wrong. Meghan shares photos of garden parties and parenting milestones. Harry releases statements about mental health and resilience. On the surface, it's all smiles and positivity. But beneath that facade, there's a nervousness no amount of PR can disguise. Because they know Perry doesn't have to lift a finger to make this crisis explode. He just has to pick up the phone. Some believe the Sussexes are betting that Perry's own reputation will keep him quiet. After all, he has a lot to lose if he's seen as vindictive or unprofessional. But that calculation underestimates the damage that Perry believes has already been done to him. Being abandoned by the people you protected isn't just humiliating, it's infuriating. And sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to speak the truth, no matter the fallout. There's also the question of legacy. For Meghan and Harry, their entire post-royal existence has been about proving they could thrive without the institution that shaped them. Perry reveals that their success was heavily subsidized, and that much of their story was curated. It will be harder than ever to argue that they're independent. It will reinforce the suspicion that they simply traded one kind of hierarchy for another, wrapping it in the language of empowerment to make it more palatable. And perhaps the most painful possibility is that Perry doesn't even intend to destroy them. He may simply feel he has a right to set the record straight after being erased from their narrative. But whether it's motivated by anger or principle, the result will be the same. Once the receipts are out, there is no putting them back in the box. Because no matter how many statements Meghan and Harry release, no matter how many glossy cover stories they secure, one reality is unavoidable. The most powerful story is always the one that sounds the most honest. And if Perry's version feels more genuine than theirs, the public will believe him. Every time.